Making it to the NFL is improbable enough on its own, but for Sammis Reyes, improbable doesn't even begin to cover it. Welcome to the Everyman series on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for those of you who listen to Locked On Vikings every single day. My hashtag everydayers, especially those of you hanging around in June. I appreciate you all so very much. And hey, if you are new here, hello and welcome. Bienvenidos, because you might be Chilean, because we're talking about Sammis Reyes today. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, by the way. Just search out Locked On Vikings wherever you listen to shows, including YouTube or even Amazon Fire and Roku, if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Today we are continuing with the Everyman series, a series here on Locked On Vikings we do every summer where we go over the backstories and the journey to the NFL and the Vikings in particular for each new Minnesota Viking. And today's is about a player that feels like he shouldn't be here. And that's not to say anything about his skill level or talent or work ethic or anything like that. It's not about being NFL quality or not. It's that what has occurred to get to this point feels genuinely impossible. Just beyond improbability, beyond just, wow, here's a stroke of luck. There are several completely impossible things that happen here. And they start to stack on each other in a way where you just feel like somebody's looking out for this guy. Sammis Reyes was born in Talcahuano, Chile, but he moved to Santiago when he was very young. Santiago, Chile is built on mining. That's like the history of the city, and it's a very like blue collar city that then grew to become like urban capital of Chile and all that. And when you get that, just socioeconomically, when you get that kind of vibe of a town that then grows into urban, there's going to be a lot of poverty. It's just what happens. And so the Reyes family grew up in a not great part of Santiago. There was poverty, there was violence, there was strife. Both of his parents were, the article describes them as hoopers. They're both basketball people. So they had a basketball in their kids' hands from a very, very young age. And I think that was the sort of pure getaway, the escape from all of the grim realities of living in Santiago, Chile. And he took to basketball very well. He would dribble it around everywhere as a cute little toddler. And when he grew up real big. He's like 6'5", 220 as like a 14-year-old. Like huge growth spurt, and was a dominant force of basketball in his age group. He also grew up watching LeBron James and dreaming of the NBA. So we've got the makings of like a superstar basketball player. And here's where I should probably tell you that maybe the first like real, the first like, to use a Dungeons and Dragons term, the first Nat 20 of all of this, the first major stroke of success is that Sammis Reyes, this is a basketball story. We're not actually going to talk about Sammis Reyes playing football for like 20 minutes of this podcast. And the fact that that turns into an NFL story is already something that feels like it just shouldn't exist. But here we are. He's a basketball guy. He gets the attention of the Chilean national team, and they want to start putting him in tournaments. So they'll actually fly him out to Texas to play in a tournament for the Amateur Athletic Union. So he goes and plays for the Chilean national team, and he's a total stud there. And he gets the attention of like prep schools in Texas and Florida. There's a prep school in Florida called Westlake Preparatory School, and gets their attention. He also gets noticed by a guy named George Perez, who's in the college recruiting pipeline. So he is now like in the eyes of the system of basketball recruiting. They have noticed this like hyper jacked 14, 15-year-old basketball player. But to get into the college like pipeline, you have to go to an American school, hence Westlake Prep, which is a great option in Florida with a long-standing history of, I am getting word that they have shut down. Like 2 seconds after he gets there, they shut down. It's horrible. Another terrible stroke of luck. This is the kind of thing that if it happens to your kid, no matter how athletic your kid is, that is probably the end of his dream, and there's not much you can do about it. Sammis Reyes is stuck now in America without really a direction, having to still find a way to try and go pursue his NBA dream. Now, there is a perseverance and a persistence around this guy that crops up many times in this story. But right now, he's 14 years old in a completely foreign country. He barely speaks any English. He learns English by watching like TV with subtitles on and like stopping to look stuff up in the dictionary and like taking notes and stuff, and by listening to the Wu-Tang Clan. That's actually, it sounds funny, but that's not actually that uncommon of an experience for like an immigrant trying to learn English, where they will kind of just pick it up through like media and pop culture. But at this point, his English is like sparing at best. It's like barely survival level. And like he can't like hold a true conversation. He can maybe ask for directions, that kind of thing. Not to mention that, but the prep school that you were staying at is now shut down and everybody's moving out. He'll stay there. He'll be the last kid off that campus. He'll stay there for a few months. And some other figures will be like checking in on him and stuff. We'll get to a couple of them later. But the other issue is money. He gets about $50 a month from his parents for food. That's the best they can do. And he's got to stretch that out through a whole month. So there's a lot of, what can I get for $3? There's a lot of trying to like make a friend and hope that they invite you over for dinner. There's an anecdote that's in all of these like super Puff PC write-ups about him. So I should include it in mine. About him going to a donut shop, a local donut shop, and basically striking a deal that says, I'll give you $1, give me a dozen of the donuts you were going to throw out because it's the end of the night. And he'll take that and he'll like have to stretch. He's like, okay, that's 3 days of food. I'll eat stale donuts now for 3 days. And he's doing the best he can. He is a survivor in every sense of the word, dealing with having to fend for himself. Through all of this, he never tells his parents how much he's struggling because he knows that dad's going to be on the next flight out to come yank him home. And that is not acceptable. He will not be denied. That's the end of my NBA dream and I'm not doing it, so I'm going to eat donuts. He is going to grow up to be an incredibly self-sufficient person, in large part because of these experiences. But in hindsight, he's like, yeah, that was awful. All parts of that were terrible. But it's part of his life story, and it certainly informs who he is as a person. Now, before Westlake Prep shut down, he trained with a guy named Roosevelt Gray, who coached there, was basketball coach there. And he knew one of the other kids on these like amateur athletic union tournament teams named Alex Rifkind. Alex Rifkind's dad is Steve Rifkind. And if you're big into the music industry, you might even know that name. He's the executive that founded, get this, Loud Records, the record label, which at this time had just signed Wu-Tang Clan. Big fan, Sammis Reyes, now hanging out with the Loud Records heir, kind of. He was like the founder and owner of it. And Steve Rifkind will be a huge benefactor to Sammis Reyes and his journey. They'll eventually take him in. Sammis and Alex Rifkind are still best friends to this day. And Steve Rifkind is one of another, like many people who are looking at this kid and going, you look like a football player. Roosevelt Gray is telling him that. Basketball people are telling him that, saying, man, you should really try football. People at the high school that he's at Westlake Prep told him that, right? Everybody's telling him he maybe should be a football player. And that call to football is echoing through all of this. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is a great place to find whatever it is that your car needs, whether it's a supercharger, a roof rack, exhaust kit, an LED headlight, something cosmetic to help express yourself in whatever cool style you want on your car, or something under the hood that it needs just to get you from point A to point B. Your ride or die is everything. It is part of your lifestyle. It is probably very important to your livelihood. So make sure you get that thing taken care of. They have over 122 million parts for your car. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time or your money back. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. When you're done here, go check out the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube page. You can find the Minnesota Football Party, which I'm on Mondays and Thursdays, and you can also find a 24/7 all things Minnesota sports stream. Congrats to the links, by the way. Continuing on with the Everyman series here on the Locked On Vikings podcast, let's maybe talk about football. So, Sammis Reyes will pick up a football for the first time in spring of his junior year of high school. He would agree after much badgering from his high school coaches that, okay, I'll try this out for a week. I'll do 1 week of spring, and we'll see if it calls to me. And they put him at defensive end because he just looks like a defensive end. And they say, look, I know you don't know anything about it, but see that guy? He's the quarterback. Go get him. And he dominates. So much so that it gets the attention of a bunch of people that were there that didn't even know who he was yet, that were definitely not there to watch him, but by the end of the day, they were. This will happen in Boca Raton at a fancy schmancy boarding school that the Rifkinds helped him get into. There he will also meet his girlfriend, Nicole. I believe they're still together to this day. And he would actually later move in with her family too. This is kind of a culture shock for him. He has basically only known struggle to this point. He's had his family and where he lives in Santiago, where, yeah, family is there for you, but I can only do so much. And then, of course, basically slumming it in Westlake and trying to deal with that when he was a kid. But now he's in like a nice area of Boca Raton, Florida, Broward County. North Broward Prep is what it is. And North Broward Prep, very good high school very good football program in Florida, and a place where college recruiters are always watching. So when a random basketball player just shows up to practice and absolutely floors all of these like D1 prospects, you're going, okay, let's write this kid's name down. They will actually start poking around and talking to him, but that week of spring football will end, and he says, that was fun, but it's not for me. I am a basketball player. I'm going to play basketball. And everybody says, you're making a huge mistake, man. You're a football player. Look at you. You're built for this. You would be so good as a football player. But it's not like he was any slouch at basketball either. He would eventually get D1 offers from basketball programs as well. There's a very endearing stubbornness to all of this. He really, truly will not be denied. This is the kind of guy that you're dealing with. There is this stubbornness, but also this like fierce independence to it. And that kind of person is never going to listen when a grown-up says, hey, maybe you should play a different sport than the one you've been dreaming about all your life. It's just not going to compute. It's not surprising at all to me that somebody with those experiences has turned into that kind of personality. He'll end up taking a scholarship to the University of Hawaii. He goes there his freshman year, which is 2014. And that is a pretty bad time to go to the University of Hawaii to play basketball. For one, he'll get hurt. He tears his ACL, I think it was. He'll miss that year. But also, right when he gets to Hawaii, they are embroiled in a recruiting scandal that spans all kinds of things. It's like the AD is coaching when he's not supposed to, and there's boosters like letting people drive cars they're not supposed to, like breaking all kinds of NCAA rules. It's this whole big giant investigation. Maybe you even remember it if you're really into college basketball. The head coach will end up stepping down over it. The program is like totally decimated. They like can't play in the playoffs for a while. It's terrible. And he got hurt, so he couldn't even play anyways. So he transfers away. He goes to West Palm Beach, and then he ends up at Tulane trying to get playing time. But it is kind of at this point where basketball starts to reject him itself. And it's no longer just coaches telling him, hey, maybe you should try a different sport. Now basketball itself is telling him this ain't for you. Because he's not getting any playing time at Tulane. He's averaging like a point a game. And you're not going to get into the NBA doing that, right? He's just kind of a bench player at a random school nobody's looking at. And I mean, like, I kind of get it, right? Like when you're 13 or 14 and you sprout up to 6'5", everybody's going, okay, you're going to play basketball. But once you're in college, 6'5" is not good enough anymore. I mean, you're big, you can do it. If you can shoot, like, you're fine. But suddenly that advantage is no longer tempered, and maybe even is an advantage everybody else has over you that you now have to overcome. It's going to just make things harder. So basketball is fizzling on him. He'll finish out at Tulane, he'll graduate, he'll get his degree, he'll do the grad thing, he'll grad transfer to Loyola College in Louisiana and try to get more time there. But obviously you're well past, actually garnering NBA interest. It is at this point that, if you ask him now about this, he will say, man, I really wish I listened to everybody and tried football because of how much more experience he could have gotten, because he is now out of college. We still haven't actually started playing football yet. We got 1 week in high school. So we still haven't really started, the dream of becoming a football player yet, whereas most of these stories start with kids throwing the football around at 4 years old before they even know what they're really doing. But again, this guy trusts himself and his own instincts. He's probably been told a lot of things by a lot of grown-ups, but the only one that's been consistently right is himself, because he has proven himself right. So he continues to listen to himself, and he continues to try to pursue that dream of basketball until it is undeniably clear the writing is on the wall and there's no more ignoring it, that you're not making it to the NBA. And now he's at something of a crossroads. He is talking to Nicole about it. He's talking to Alex about it. They're still very much good friends. And it's clear that it's time to find another path. Around this time, the three of them go to a Wu-Tang Clan concert in New York. And for whatever reason, that's where it clicks. That'll be next on the Locked On Vikings podcast. We have already gone through a lot of very improbable things, like a kid from Chile ending up at this really good school in Florida by happenstance, meeting the record executive that becomes kind of his benefactor. Steve Riskind will kind of explain it as a blindside situation, although I don't know how that might not be what you want to say anymore. That was an old article, but that's kind of the vibe here. That also means that if you're going to go to the concert of somebody who is signed by Loud Records, you get to go to the fancy schmancy after party and rub elbows with all the other bigwigs. There is this scene that is the opening to a Sports Illustrated article where I got a lot of this information. Again, link in the show notes. Please yell at me if I forget, because it's really, really good. And it opens with this conversation between this dastardly trio of Sammis Reyes, his girlfriend Nicole, his friend Alex, and they cross paths and they have dinner with this guy named Christian Dawkins. Again, if you are a big college basketball fan enough to be familiar with recruiting scandals, you might already recognize that name. This is that Christian Dawkins. Totally different thing. Don't worry about it. Has nothing to do with this story. But suffice it to say, he's also somebody that's really steeped in the world of evaluating young athletes and saying, I see it in you and I don't see it in you. And he's also the kind of bigwig that you would find after a Wu-Tang concert in Manhattan. And for whatever reason, the conversation comes up and he says, hey, you kind of look like you should play football. I don't really see you as a basketball player. I see you more as a football player. And he's seen it. He's like, yeah. I've heard this a million times. But for whatever reason, that's the one that gets through to him. That's the one that says, hey, maybe it's just the timing of it all, where he's, basketball is fizzling on him and he's looking for his next thing. And he's going, everybody has kind of been telling me I should try football. Maybe I should try football. So he talks it over with Nicole and they agree. All right, let's try this let's give this a year. We'll do a year. He'll apply to the International Pathways program, which is a way for him to actually get into the NFL draft as though he were a college football player. He'll train for it. He'll try to figure out football and see if the NFL will take him. Understand the long shot we are talking about here. This guy did not play college football. He played college basketball, but he did not play college football. how insane is it that we are talking about this on a podcast covering an NFL team, and this is not a rookie. This guy's been in the league a little while. Stack that up, that just impossibility. Stack that up with all the other things. He hooks up with a guy named Justin Kavanaugh, who's a trainer. He trains with a bunch of NFL players. At the time, he was training with the Edmonds brothers, Terrell and Tremaine. And Justin Kavanaugh says, okay, yeah, let's see what you got. All right, let's bring you in. Let's do a workout. He puts him through all the agility drills and like athletic tests and stuff. And he passes all those with flying colors. Like he takes his shirt off and he's just like cut. The guy's like, Jesus Christ, who's been training you? Which is like, everybody has had this reaction to him when seeing him. Is like, oh my goodness. And like, if you see him on a video, like, yeah, this dude is absolutely shredded. So like you could like even by NFL standards, this dude's absolutely jacked. So he runs him through all this stuff and says, okay, you kind of look about tight end size. You got basketball experience. That's like such a thing with tight ends, right? Let's see what you got. I'm going to throw you a bunch of passes. Does not drop a single one. So Justin Kavanaugh is like, okay, we might have something here. And he trains with that for a while. He applies to the International Pathways program. He gets it. They train at IMG Academy for a little while, which is nice because he's still got ties in Florida. And after that workout with Justin Kavanaugh, he like calls Nicole and he's like, I think I might actually be able to make this. Like, this might not be just like a stupid, silly idea that I'm doing to basically take a gap year before I get serious and get a real job. And he works at it. And he approaches it with the same vigor that he has approached everything else. The dream at this point, at the ripe age of like 21 years old, he's like, I think I'll try football. And he studies Rob Gronkowski. He studies George Kittle. He watches DK Metcalf and says, like, how does he, box out? How can I take my basketball skills and translate them to being a tight end? He's trying to learn blocking. That's like catching the ball and boxing out and stuff. That's kind of a similar athleticism to basketball, as is well documented. Blocking, totally new thing. You got to learn that, right? So that's what he's watching Gronkowski for. And he will declare for the 2020 NFL draft. But unfortunately, that is a really bad year to be a guy coming from somewhere off the beaten path. For obvious reasons, it's harder for him to get on the radar of NFL teams. He won't go drafted. But because he's in the International Pathways program, he doesn't count towards anyone's roster spot. And it's the same with the Vikings. He doesn't count toward their 90-man roster. He won't count toward their 53-man roster, I believe, either. So there's actually a really good path for him to make the team. And because of this, he's a very free flyer that everyone wants to take a chance on. Look at this jacked dude that has just started playing football and already kind of seems like a natural at it. Do you think your coach can mold this? Of course you do. And by the way, it doesn't cost you anything. So he gets calls from like 20 NFL teams. He'll end up signing with the Washington football team it is at the time. This is 2021. He lives in Washington now at the time, so it's a perfect fit. And now the dream is to make the team, right? He says he doesn't want an end like in Rudy, where it's you make like one play and that's so happy. Like, no, he wants to like really establish a career and really make something of himself. And sure enough, he'll make the Washington football team. He'll be a part of that team. He gets in spot duty, special teams. It's not a lot, but it's a foothold. And I, again, just feel the need to like zoom out and reflect on how many miracles it took to be like player 52 on a 7-10 NFC East team. Like, this is not glamour yet. He's not the main tight end or anything like that. Who knows if he even would have made the team were it not for the International Pathways thing. Like, he is still very new to the sport, but work your butt off on special teams. A lot of people are learning special teams for the first time when they get to the pros, because a lot of these guys were too important to be on the kickoff unit in their college teams. But now you got to be there. Now that you're in the NFL, you're no longer that guy. You got to be on the kickoff team and learn this for the first time. So it's like, he's not quite as behind the learning curve in special teams as he is in everything else, and he's attacking it with that same work ethic and that same ardent and unflinching belief in himself. And that's what I think makes this whole thing very cool. There are so many times when it would have been perfectly acceptable, nay, responsible, to hang it up. and then say, okay, I'm eating stale donuts and sleeping on like park benches. Maybe I should pack this in. I'm 16 years old. I should just go home. Basketball didn't work. Maybe I should just go home, or maybe I should just go, I graduated. I've got my degree. Maybe it's time to like actually launch a career somewhere in the private sector. But like, no, he just says no to all of that. Everybody's telling me football. No, screw you. I'm a basketball player. Like, it's that same attitude. So if I got on here on this mic and I said, he's kind of a nobody. He was like on practice squads and stuff. He won't make the team. Like, that would go in one ear and out the other. And so it should for a player like that. He'll be there for 2021. He actually does even get a start because of COVID, a COVID disaster that hits the Washington football team. He actually gets it. He'll get COVID later that year too. But 2022, he hurts his hamstring at like the worst time, and he misses a bunch of camp, and he'll get released with an injury settlement. He'll spend some time on Chicago's practice squad, and then he'll go to Jacksonville for last year. That's where he was. And there he gets a concussion that's so bad, he mulls and actually commits to retirement from the NFL. So we also have retired. This is already such an impossible thing. There's also retirement from the NFL, and now we're coming back out of retirement in Minnesota. He'll go and get like a media job, but I guess that didn't stick because he decides, all right, let me just try this mini camp. So he's a mini camp player too. And so you have that improbability. And for those that don't know, rookie mini camp, of course, that's where the rookies are, but you only have like 16 rookies on your team, or so you've got like a few undrafted free agents in your draft class, basically, right? Plus maybe some second-year long shot players. You don't have enough players to really like execute the drills with the timing and the tempo that you're looking for, so you bring in a lot of other people to kind of fill things out. Quarterbacks to throw to the receivers, that kind of stuff. Guys to block against when you're working on your pass rush moves. And for those players, it's a de facto tryout. If you can show up and you can show that team that you're better than the guy they just spent a 90-man roster slot on, we'll cut that guy and we'll sign you. Nothing's stopping us from doing that. And plenty of players have made it to the league doing that. Adam Thielen, of course, famous example of that. You might remember Chad Beebe doing that a few years ago. And there's usually 3 or 4 players that the Vikings will take. The Vikings, Rick Spielman loved to do it. Kind of seems like Kwesi does too. So this is one of those guys. Plus with the international pathway thing, doesn't count as a roster spot. Easy flyer, go prove yourself. And he does that at rookie minicamp, and now here he is, going into his 4th year ever of playing football, right? Even for a player, like there's some players on the Vikings that didn't pick up football till their like sophomore year. And they didn't really break out until junior, senior year of college. And that's kind of where we are. So Sammis Reyes as a flyer, as a mystery box, as an X factor, utterly fascinating. Who knows what it'll be, right? He's coming off of practice squads. He's getting cut with injury settlements and stuff. He's been retired. He's coming out of retirement. He's been through everything, and he's still very relatively new to football. But after everything that we have gone over in this story, I am dying to see what happens next. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, Skol.